event, or Think Spring event. If any of you were here then, it was on March 1st, and it was so blistery cold outside, you could barely stand to walk in here, so we thought, well, we'll move it out a few weeks and it'll be nicer. No, it doesn't happen that way, I guess. So you're all here to learn about the basic gardening techniques. And my name is Sharon Reed, and I'm with the Chautauqua County Master Gardeners. Do you all know what Master Gardeners means?
No.
Well, we are volunteers in the community. We are a part of a program through Cornell Cooperative Extension. And the Cooperative Extension is going to actually be having another class this coming fall. If anybody's interested in that, you can stop outside there and put your name down the list. But we are volunteers who are interested in gardening, who are willing to volunteer time back to the community. We are required to do at least 50 hours of classroom, or 50 hours of volunteer activity in a year. And it doesn't have to be facilitating classrooms. It can be working in gardens. It can be working at the plant sales, all sorts of things. You can work at the Audubon, which is one of our my big projects. So we also have to do this class. There's about 60 hours of classroom instruction. And going the wrong way. There's the training list. I'm not going to go over that. They're all in your handouts. A lot of topics that you see there. All delivered by subject matter experts, either folks that are professionals in the community or Cornell educators. These are some of the groups that we are serving right now. We've got a helpline that will start up in April. If you have a gardening question or issue, you can call the Cornell Cooperative Extension helpline. A Master Gardener will be there on Wednesdays. You can also email us, or you can leave a voice message, and they will investigate your issue and get back to you on that. We do some pH testing of soil samples at the Ag Center, just the generic ones. If you need something more in-depth than just a pH test, you can also do a soil sample, and we will work you through the process of submitting that to Cornell for evaluation. And there's a fee for that type of soil sample. We do presentations, workshops, community gardens. We've got a group that focuses on the Mayville Food Pantry Garden, for example, and they started out as a food pantry garden, now they're educating, they're doing workshops in the Mayville area on that. We do some publications. We have newsletters and articles that you'll see in the Post-Journal and the Gazette and the other local newspapers. We work with youth and special needs, and then of course there's all sorts of project work that we get involved in. There's the Master Gardener helpline. It's on your handout. What is not going to be too visible on the screen is because I can't figure out how to make these websites not turn blue, and they sort of disappear. But we have a Facebook page, and so we would like you to have that information, and you should be able to read it on that. Yes?
The community gardens, are they the ones that, like, there's one on Washington and A?
No, those are community gardens. They're through the Jamestown Renaissance Corporation, but they're not Master Gardener community gardens, but they're Master Gardeners who do work on that project and help folks with that. Yes.
Okay.
So if you're interested in those community gardens, those boxes, you need to see the Resource Center, or the Renaissance Center folks at the table up there.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there another workshop for that?
I'm not sure. There's going to do something about community gardens today later. Okay, so you're thinking about starting a garden. The first question is, where do you begin? Well, the one thing that I always suggest to people is to look at some garden books. And the cheapest garden book that you can get is the seed catalog. There's tons of varieties of seed catalogs. This is just the stack that I received one like in a 2-week period of time. Once you get on a mailing list, you get lots of them. And you'll get all sorts of things. Now, I have some seed catalogs here. When you leave, if you're interested in taking a seed catalog, you're welcome to do that. Now, there's three different vendors that did supply me catalogs. But if you would mind, since the size of the group, just taking one, because we're going to do this class over again, and I would like to have enough for everybody else too. This company, this Territorial Seed Company, is a good catalog because in the back, and most all seed catalogs have that. There's lots of tips and techniques and hints and different ideas on how to make a raised bed or whatever you might be interested in doing. Lots of information in seed catalogs, not just on the seeds themselves. Sorry. So, the next thing you'd want to do is identify what type of garden that you're thinking about doing. And for some reason, I have this, I think there's a paradigm with me that I'm a vegetable gardener. And it's not just vegetable gardens. It's flowers, perennials, annuals, vegetables, herbs. You can be any kind of a gardener. You don't have to just be focused on one thing. And I do a lot of education workshops on vegetable gardens, but I also do lots of other things. And if you look at my Pinterest site, you're going to see that. And I would invite you to go ahead and look at that because as I was prepping for this workshop, I started to try to keep track of all the neat things that I want to do in my garden. And it's hard to do that in your brain because old brains only have so much space to keep things. So that's wonderful that you've got Pinterest now to save that stuff on. Pinterest is a website that you can get through Facebook, or you can just go, I think, Pinterest.com and find it. But once you log into it, it's addicting. You see all these neat things that you want to do. So now you've got an idea that you want to plant a garden. What do you do next? Well, you've got to look at your location because that's really critical. You've got to identify, is it sunny, is it shady? Because vegetable gardens, and that's what I'm going to talk about mostly today, is vegetable gardens, they require the sun. At least 6 to 8 hours of sun every day. Now, if you want to plant a floral garden and you're looking and you've got a shady spot, you can do a shade garden easily by looking for shade-loving plants. But like I said, today we're going to talk mostly about vegetables. Is the ground, your location, wet or is it dry? You've got to have water, but you don't want it soaking wet either. You need to have some drainage there. Is this a new garden area or are you refurbishing a garden area? So if you've got a new garden, you've got some additional work that may be necessary. If it's got sod there, or somehow you're going to need to get rid of the sod, whether you cut it up and till it in, or just remove it from the ground. You want to get that grass off the top, because if you don't, you'll be pulling it forever. But there's other ways to get around grass too. You can mulch over it and do things like that, and I'll talk about those too. If it's refurbished, maybe you just need to go through and till it back up, turn it over, figure out what's in there. The biggest thing is, what is the soil like? Is the soil loose? Is it clay? Is it rocky? Do you have big boulders in there? Is it sandy? Most likely in this area you're going to have clay type soil. You're going to probably need to do some amending of it. And that means you're going to put some organic matter in there. And that could be peat moss, it could be compost, it could be tilling in some leaves from the year before. You're going to find gardeners don't throw anything away. And I have neighbors that mow their grass and bag their grass and set the bags for me to pick up. And the leaves, I drove by our house one day and I saw these bags sitting out in this neat little stack, and I thought those bags look like leaves because they just had that look about them. So I go and knock at her door and I asked her, I said, I introduced myself to her, and what's in the bags? And she said, leaves. I said, can I have them? She said, you want my leaves? Yeah. So now it's this routine. Whenever I see 3 little bags sitting in front of her house, I know it's either leaves or grass and it's there for me. So you'll find yourself, if you get into this gardening thing, you'll find yourself looking for stuff that you wouldn't normally thought you would have ever done. So then you want to determine the plants that you're going to plant in your garden. And there's a couple of things that you can do here. You can start seedlings, which for me, not only am I picking up stuff off the streets, but I am very frugal in spending my money wisely, because I don't want to spend more than I have to build my garden. So I start my seedlings a lot of the times. You could purchase plants, and I'm not going to say that's not a smart idea, because I purchase plants also. And then you can plant seeds. But starting seeds is very simple. And I want to show you an easy way of doing that. Again, if any of you subscribe to this item here, it comes every day to your front door, and you read it, and then you probably put it in the burn barrel or fireplace, or you recycle it and take it to wherever it goes, or you shred it, and we'll talk about that too. I make garden origami out of it, and I take a piece and I cut it into about a 6 or 7 inch square, and I fold it into thirds, and I fold it into thirds once again, and the instructions are in your package for this. When I open it up, I then fold the corners. This is, like I said, it's garden origami. I fold the corners. I fold the corners. And now I have a little box. And there's, when you make these little pots, I suggest you use like 6, 7 layers of paper. You want to make it substantial enough. And I didn't bring a stapler here with me, but I would staple it so it's nice and secure. While you're watching TV, you can sit and make these up. They're sort of brain numbing after a while. But what do I do with these? Then I fill them with my soil. And I brought this soil simply because I got a good deal on it at the hardware store over on Foot Avenue. It's called Seed Starting Mix. It's a little bit lighter than regular potting soil. And if you were to use regular potting soil, you would want to amend it with peat moss or some perlite or verlicamite or something to make it a little looser, because you don't want it to get too wet and soggy. I like to use the lighter weight stuff. And you can, like I said, you can buy the less expensive soil and just add some stuff to it to make it so that it doesn't get too moist. And then what I do is I fill it with soil, I put it in, I plant my little seeds in there. And you probably have something, this is just a plant tray that you can see it, you can find these at any garden center. Again, I'm showing this to you only because they're readily available in the local stores. But there is nothing to tell you that you can't do like I do and go to Second Chances and buy a tray or a cookie sheet or something to that effect and reuse, recycle, and reduce, right? And then you just set your little pots in here and plant your seeds. You can cover it with a tray, cover it with saran wrap, whatever you might have, because you want these seeds to now start germinating. And one other thing before, you can also use these. If you're just going to do a few seeds, this is if you buy lettuce, there's this one, you want one that doesn't have holes in. Some of these have holes in. But you would put your little seed pots in here, put your lid on it, and that way you can set it out and germinate, and then you've got this little mini greenhouse, right? Now, with that in mind, when you germinate seeds, they don't need light to germinate, but they do need warmth. In your handout is a one-page sheet, and I wanted to introduce you to Charles in the back room here. Charles and I were at a meeting, and I was doing this presentation, and he was showing us something else. And so I told him, I went down, I told him I plagiarized him, and I wanted to make sure that he was recognized for this. But Charles came up with this little slick idea. If you have some insulation board, you just cut it into strips. These are 20 inches by 6, and all the dimensions are in there. He used a little plug-in nightlight. You see in the bottom, there's a nightlight in there that's hooked to this extension cord. Now, I had written in the instructions another idea that I've seen where they use Christmas lights, holiday lights, not the LED ones because you need the heat. And you would lay the lights, a string of lights in here. And actually, you could set several of these boxes together and run the string up. You know, if you have 100 string lights, you can probably do 3 or 4 boxes. In this situation, he made this little back wall to deflect the heat that's going to hit right in the center. So what this does is it forms the heat around in there. The dimensions are made just perfect for that particular seed tray. And it's relatively inexpensive to make it. There's nothing fancy about it. This one's wired together. When I rewrote the instructions, I suggested maybe duct taping it, the corners, if you don't have the wire. Most people have some kind of duct tape around. So that's a neat little seed warmer. You know, so you can do something like that. Traditionally, set it on top of the refrigerator, someplace where it's got a little warmth. The seeds will start to germinate in a few days, and then they'll need some sunlight. Now, one of the things that you just need to be careful of is these are going to, yes?
Is there an ideal temperature? I mean, you're trying to achieve with the light?
I'm going to say, what, 70, 75 degrees maybe. It doesn't have to be hot, hot. It just has to be, you know, steady warm. So you need to make sure that they stay moist. And one of the things that I do is I take the newspaper sheets, the big sheets, I would lay them on the bottom of my tray, several layers thick. And they're going to act like a blotter, and they're going to hold more moisture in there. You can also use, and please don't think I recycle these, is diapers. But you could use diapers or those pads that maybe you have from somebody that's been in the hospital, you know, or something like that. Or newspapers, or an old tea towel, a cotton towel, something that you want to put in there so that it holds some water. And it holds it a little bit longer. And that's one of my tricks. It also, if you wanted to move it, you're not so likely to slide water all over if it's in some kind of a pad like that. The plants need to be watered from the bottom. If you water from the top, you might disturb the seedlings. There could be diseases caused from that, but it's better watering it from the bottom anyway. Now, if you do the seed pot like I showed you here, I will guarantee you that you will not be able to move this out of the pot without the bottom coming out. Now, the whole purpose of this is you don't want to disturb the roots in your little seedling that you've got going here. So this whole pot gets buried into the ground when you go to plant it in the garden. You're going to plant the whole thing, make sure that all the paper is underground so that it doesn't act like a wick and dry the plant up. But I would suggest if you do something like this, that you take the tray right to your garden, grab a kitchen spatula or something, a putty knife or something, and scoop underneath that to get it out of there, because the bottom will decompose. This will decompose in your garden. Most printing companies this day and age are using a soy-based ink. You don't need to worry about there being heavy metals in the ink. So those issues are out of the picture too. So that's how you can start, a simple way to start seeds. Of course, you can go buy plants. Now, yesterday I went to Plantasia, and one thing that was brought up yesterday, I was in a session on pests and insects, is if you go to the store and you buy plants, you may want to make sure that you pick the plant up and look at it, and if a little white fly flies out of it, just put it back down and go to another place. Because they're white flies, they don't winter over, but you really don't want to bring them to your garden. They're just a nuisance pest. So just, if you see a white fly flying around, just go someplace else and find one that doesn't have them. But purchase plants are readily available. If you're going to plant a tomato plant in your garden, the one thing that I make sure you know is the tomato should be planted deep into the soil. If you look at the stem of the tomato, there'll be little prongs coming out or little nodules. Plant it all the way down so that because that's going to generate more roots and you're going to get a stronger root base in your tomato plant. The last thing you can do is plant seeds. Many of the vegetables that you grow in your garden, you can start from seed. Your cucumbers, squash, summer squash, the corn, all sorts of, the lettuces, most everything. I would say if you're going to start with starting seedlings or buying plants, you're going to look at tomatoes, peppers, maybe eggplant, those things that are a little bit longer season to grow, need a little longer season to grow. Okay. Okay, wow, I got way ahead of myself. Okay, so once it's warm enough to plant your seeds or your plants in the garden, you need to make sure you can remove all those big rocks, and you've probably already gotten to that point if you're getting your garden ready. Okay. I put down here rototill the soil. I know that not everybody has a rototiller, but you've got to do something to loosen it up, and you're going to want to make sure that you've got good compost or amendments in there. So this is the time when one of the most important things you should do, and I'm going to raise my hand or ask if anybody has done this, and I'll raise my hand and say I've never done this, but it is one of the most important things to do, and that's the soil's pH test. Vegetables need to have acidic soil. We live in an area where the majority of folks have an acidic soil already. So that's really not a big deal here, but depending on what you want to grow. If you want to grow blueberries, it needs to be extremely acidic. So you really need to have a soil sample depending on what crops you're going to plant. For vegetables, you need acidic soil. For some flowers, you don't want it to be acidic, so you need to do some kind of a soil test. And you can buy test kits at the Home Depot or Lowe's and places like that. Or like I said, go to the Ag Center and the Master Gardeners will do that for you. Okay, so the next step is to prepare your rows and start planting your seeds. Now, you see people that plant gardens and they're in straight rows, and you've got a whole row of beans and a whole row of cucumbers and a whole row of this, and you don't come to my house because they're not planted in rows at my house. And my husband is, you don't plant a garden right because they're not in straight rows. I don't want straight rows. I want patches. This is my cucumber patch, and this is my corn patch. And there's nothing wrong with that. You plant your garden the way you want your garden to look. You don't need to worry about them being in a straight row and everything being so orderly. We're not orderly. Nature's not orderly. And the other thing, if you're planting corn, it needs to have at least 4 rows in order for it to pollinate, because it's a wind-pollinated plant. So you can't plant it in rows unless you're going to plant 4 rows. So I get away with planting patches. I like patches. I just like the looks of it. You can sort of meander through and feel like you're in another world. So you're going to prepare to plant, and then you direct seed those plants, transplant any seedlings. Oops. One thing that I've got here is a couple of, and I use these books all the time. The first one is it's published a long time ago. It's called Carrots Love Tomatoes. And this talks about companion planting and how you can improve your garden's productivity and reduce pests by planting the correct plant, by companion planting. So if you wanted to attract pollinators to your garden, you'll look in here and you'll say, well, I need to plant things like dill or other plants that have lots of flowers that the insects will come to. And this whole book talks a lot about that. Carrots Love Tomatoes. The other one that I really is more dog-eared, and this one actually goes out into my garden when I'm actually planting my garden. And this was written by Sally Cunningham. I don't know if you know Sally, that name. She's from Buffalo. She's a master gardener. Oh, she has this book, and it's called Great Garden Companions. And it talks a lot about the same things that this Carrots Love Tomatoes, but she goes into a lot more user-friendly ideas and raised beds and planting in patches, and she's sort of like my mentor. So that's another book that I would highly recommend. It's available on Amazon, I believe, or you can go to the Rodale site and order it from there.
What was the last name again?
Sally Cunningham. Thank you. And actually, I talked with her yesterday to see if I could get some books to bring for today. She was willing to let me take some, but I wasn't able to commit. I didn't know if I could distribute that many, so anyway, they're available. So the last step is to water. Your garden's going to need water. Now this, there's some folks that will get out a garden hose and they'll start watering and they'll spray it around and they watered it. A little bit is not going to help. You need to make sure that you get the water, because if a little bit of rain, a little bit of garden hose is just going to sit on the surface. It's not going to help much. You would be better off if you're going to use a garden hose to do something like the spray and let it run for a few minutes, half hour or so in your garden. How many of you are paying for water and then paying for sewer? So you don't want to run it through the garden hose, at least I don't. I don't live in that area anymore. I do have a well, but I also harvest water. And so what's harvesting water? Well, it's a rain barrel. It's simple, a simple barrel that sits at my shed. It is screened so I don't have an issue with mosquitoes. Actually, oh no, I'm not. They have a compost pile, compost barrel there. There's examples all over the website. You can find all kinds of examples of rain barrels. They also sell rain barrels at the Ag Center if you wanted to purchase one. But the rain barrels, you can fill up a 50-gallon rain barrel in probably half an hour of an average rain here in this area. They fill up real quick. And I have 6 rain barrels. One overflows into the next, into the next, into the next. They have a faucet at the bottom. I just fill, hook it to a hose to it and take out the water I want. The other thing that I do is I feed my plants that way also, and that's the next item on here. You need to make sure you've somehow fed your garden. You can go and buy Miracle-Gro and put it down. You can go buy all kinds of fertilizers and put down. You can do it any way you want to do it. I do it because my neighbor over here graciously supplies me with all the horse manure I could possibly use. So if you have a good neighbor like that, that's a good way to take advantage of using up that manure. I also compost all my leftovers in my home during the winter in my worm bin. I have a worm farm in my basement, so I get the compost from the worms, which that generates a lot of liquid. That liquid goes into my rain barrel, so now I have compost tea all ready to go. Just pour it onto the garden. But you can choose to, feed it however you like. Yes?
Question, sort of two related ones. If you're going to use compost in your garden and also fertilize your garden, when do you put it in or on the garden, and do you just lay it on top or do you mix it in?
You can do it both ways. Now when I prepare my garden, my husband drives the rototiller on his tractor, so we put the compost down then and till it in. That's the one way to do it.
Do you do that every year?
Every year, yeah, because we've got a compost pile, so we just add it and get rid of it. The second thing is what they call top dressing. And that's when, after you've got your rows planted, maybe your seedlings are in there, you might want to just put some compost along the edges of the plants, a few inches away, so that it starts to go down into the soil at that point. So yes, you can do it either way. If you use compost tea, which is just water, or you can take any kind of compost and make a tea out of it, you can just pour that right over the plants. They'll absorb it through the leaves or on the roots. Yeah. Yes?
Could you describe something more about that worm farm?
Yes! We love our worms! I have time, Dawn.
Does it smell funny?
No, it does not smell at all. Well, I shouldn't say that. It does smell on occasion because the worm gardener put too many onions into the worm compost. Now, I have two ways of doing it. One is called a worm farm, and it's actually a commercially purchased item that the worms live in. The other, which is my first worm garden, works exactly the same way, extremely efficient, is to take a tote, a plastic tote, not one like that because the lid, well, you could use that, actually, no, you couldn't use that because it's clear. First of all, the worms that you use in a worm garden, a worm composting, are red wigglers. They're not earthworm like you're just going to go out here and harvest out of the ground. They're called red wigglers. They will survive in this compost container. Like I said, I took a 18-gallon tote, 2 of them. I drilled holes in the bottom of one of them, okay, so it drains. That one I set down inside the other. It's going to be too hard to demonstrate that. I put in the, okay, so I take one tote, I set it on the ground. I put down in it 4 old plastic containers, something to hold the second tote from sinking all the way into it. I want to keep it elevated in there. And I learned the hard way. You learn things to do and not to do. Because the first time I did this, it's such a vacuum, I couldn't get the first tote, the top tote out to get to the water at the bottom. But then after you drill the holes in the second tote, which is in the middle, in the top of it, put some shredded paper down in the bottom. It's called bedding. Wet newspaper, shredded up envelopes. Avoid the plastic window envelope things because the worms can't eat that. The worms will eat your newspapers, tea bags, coffee filters, all that kind of stuff. So put the bedding down for your worms, and then you're going to put some food in there. Food will be anything that you can take off out of your kitchen, vegetables, fruits, eggshells, eggs, tea bags, coffee grounds, coffee filters. Don't put meat, cheese, fats, things like that. The one thing that it doesn't smell if you do like I'm saying. If you put onions in there or garlic, you will get an odor, obviously, for a while until they get devoured. They also say that the worms don't like citrus, but I've never had a problem with citrus. So anyway, then you put this pile of food in there, and then you get yourself some worms. And you can buy worms online. They're about $20 a pound, $30 a pound. If you know anybody who has worms, I'm sure that they'd be more than gracious to give you a handful of worms and save you that money, because that's one of those, it's like that inside society. When anybody has worms, they want to share them. And trust me, I went to my worm bed one day. I lifted the top off of it, and the entire top was white, and I thought I had a fungus. And I wasn't sure what was wrong with my worms, so I got my glasses on, I looked down, and I just had happy worms because I had solid top full babies. These little teeny tiny hair-like things that I thought was a fungus or mold were babies. And so my worms were very happy because they were being fed very well. They're in the basement where it was warm. They were doing everything that they needed to do. And now, like I said, we use a lot of produce, and all my winter produce is gone, the scraps have gone into that.
You have to chop it up?
Some people are so careful, they chop it up, or they might put it in a blender and cut it up so the worms can eat it faster. I just take it down and put it in there. I took a whole, how you cut up a head of cauliflower and you got that big stalk? It's in there, they eat it. It just takes it a little bit longer, but they eat it. So what they do is they eat this, whatever you put in there, and then they leave poop. Castings. So that you're going to be now harvesting the worm castings from this tote. And why do I put the holes in the bottom? Because there's a lot of moisture that's going to gather up here, and you don't want that to be muddy, mucky. So you're going to harvest the castings. And that you can do that simply by several ways. One is you could dump the whole tote out onto a plastic tarp and sort through it and get all your worms out. which is time consuming. Or you could trick them because they, first of all, they don't like light. So if you open the tote up and they get some light, they're gonna scurry away. So you can take some food and set it over in the corner of their house and wait for a couple of days till they all get over there to eat, and then open up the tote and take out the castings that they have now left because they're all over there eating. You might have a few worms in there, but not quite so many. And you can harvest your compost at that point. It doesn't smell. It's amazing. It doesn't smell. Yes?
How big are the holes in the bottom of the top bucket that goes in the bottom bucket?
I made the mistake of making my holes, I think I used like a 1/4 inch bit, tiny bit. That's too small.
Too small.
Yeah, it's too
Half
small.
inch?
I would use a 1/2 inch. Yeah.
Big. And how many?
Fill it. Perforate the bottom of it. Perforate the bottom of the tote. Okay.
How did you avoid your vacuum seal?
By putting the 4 containers in the bottom so that top tote sat down in there and it didn't get down all the way. I could then pick it up. Then that juice that's at the bottom is easily used as your compost tea. And you can dilute it and use it just on your plantings. Any other questions?
You can use that compost tea to dilute it and water your house plant.
Yes, you can also use the compost tea inside. Yes. There's a couple other things. Oh, I want to show you just one real quick trick because we have all gathered a lot of these, right? I have a car trunkload full of them from everywhere that I've ever shopped. You can also buy these in the garden supply centers, and I think they charge probably 18 to 20 bucks for them. They call them potato bags or tomato bags, and they plant in them. So if you don't have a big place to plant and you want to just start to garden, get one of these from the grocery store or your trunk or from some neighbor. The ones that are sort of meshy, the Wegmans ones that have that plastic coating on may not work. I haven't tried them. But the ones that they sell for that purpose are more of this mesh. Fill this up with some soil, put a couple of potatoes in there, and when you're ready to harvest it, you just dump it over and you have potatoes. Or you could plant a tomato in it. It's, whatever you want it to do. But they breathe and they will let some moisture out. But we all have a lot of these containers around. So then the other thing that I have here is documentation. Yeah. The last thing I think on my slides is documentation. I have some handouts here if you're interested and you can take one of these. It's called journaling. So last year I planted some beans and lo and behold, the Japanese beetles ate all my beans. I'm going to plant beans again this year, but I don't remember what I planted last year. But if you made a garden journal, and this particular website, this particular journal I like because it's got all the potential forms that you would want. You actually list when you planted it, what seed you planted, and how it worked out. So you sort of take an inventory of what you've got in your garden. It has a place where you can map out your garden site. It's got all sorts of things, including preservation items at the back. But I would suggest that you think about journaling your garden. Record what you've done, when you've done it, what the weather might have been like. Measure your success, plan what you're going to plant next year. It helps because you may want to rotate your crops and do something different next year. And there's one other reason to do this, and it's more of a personal reason to do this, because you probably write a garden journal and it will probably be in your own handwriting, right? Because you're going to do it when you come out of the garden. You're going to be hot and sweaty. You're going to sit down and have a glass of iced tea. And you're going to write in this journal, and then it's going to get stashed away somewhere. And someday, our grandchildren may come across something that Grandma or Grandpa wrote in their own writing. And how cool is that as a legacy item, that my grandmother wrote this 20 years ago, you know? And it just gives me goosebumps to think that you could leave that mark on some future generation. Whether you want to do it that way or not, but anyway. I would suggest you go on and like us on Facebook, the Master Gardeners Facebook page. There's also this other page, it's called buffalo-niagaragardening.com, and it is a website. You need to put in your email address and your zip code. And every week, I believe on Tuesdays, you'll get an email. You will not get any spam from this girl, but you will get an email which will have lots of gardening tips and techniques and tips and stuff on there, and activities and things that are going on in the community. And I realize it's Buffalo Niagara, but we have gotten more and more Jamestown folks in there, so we're trying to get more Jamestown events happening. So if you are a not-for-profit group or you're part of a not-for-profit group, contact this site and they will put your stuff on there for free.
Is that in the?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.